Thank you, everybody. This is our fifth webinar today, and I'm pretty happy that you're participating and that we still have a lot of people interested in the insect industry. Today's focus of the webinar is on project management and project planning and the approach to be used. And we have, again, quite interesting experts today to present based on their solutions. So we have one presenter talking about smaller farms, one presenter talking about mid-sized farms, and one presenter more and us presenting on general project management and approaches and success factors for building your insect farm. Maybe some information up front. We will have overall 1 hour and 30 minutes. And we will start with the presentations. And if you have questions, please use the chat functions in Teams to raise your questions. We will collect those questions and we'll answer those questions at the end of the presentations, which will be in roughly 1 hour. And then we have a session for question and answers where we can go through your questions and answer those questions in case there are there are a lot of questions. We can then take the remaining questions which have not been answered. We will put them in our forum section in the website, and so we can provide further answers to your questions on our website. So nothing will be lost. Overall, this webinar will be recorded. And like we did in the past, we will take some time for polishing up the recording, and then we will post everything on our website in the media library. So you can, in case you want to re-listen the webinar, or in case one of your colleagues want to see it, just needs to register on the website and can go in the media library and watch the webinars. By the way, all the prior webinars, meaning webinar 1 to 4, are already there, so feel free to listen on the other topics. The last webinar will be early August. There we will gather, let's say, some of the key experts which have presented in our webinars before to answer further questions and give you the possibility to let's say, raise questions and get some more answers from our experts. So that's about today. The agenda, as I said, I will be the moderator. I will do the webinar opening, and I will talk a little bit about project management. Vasco is from Technofood. He will be talking. He's based in Portugal. He will be talking about small, mid-sized farms, his solutions, and approach you need to take if you go for a solution like that. In the next step, we will have Jonas from Made by Made. We'll be talking about mid-sized farms for BSF. And then we have Yoav from Israel, who is running a consulting business and will talk about as well on project approach and project management. And then finally, Arthur Kühl will be talking about our ento-connect product and service offering. So that's about that. As I already mentioned, today we will start off with Vasco. He's based, as I said, in Portugal. He's the CEO of Technofood and has already built significant, let's say, implementations in Portugal. Then we have Dr. Jonas Fink. He is the managing director of Made by Made, based in Germany, running a mid-size farm and solution in a clustered model for black soldier flies. And as I said, we have Yoav based in providing his, let's say, consulting professional services offerings to the insect industry. And finally, that's Arthur and myself. Both we are founders of ento-connect. Arthur as well is, besides working in ento-connect, the CTO of Reinhardt, a well-known company for their technical solution in dry processing. So he has got quite some experience in engineering, and he works globally. So he spends a lot of time as well in Asia. And myself, Bernd Rausch, my background is more on project management and building businesses and finance of businesses. So let's go ahead, a quick run through project management. I call it project management guide. And as I said, I have 30 years of experience in project management. And let me start off maybe some key things based on my experience why projects go wrong. First of all, it's of course, if you have unexperienced management team for project and operations, that is definitely not going to work. So it's no shame not to have all experience, but you as a founder, you need at least to get the right experience on board, either contracted or as co-founders or something like that. Secondly, one of the key reasons for failures as well, the scope or scope changes are not managed properly. I have seen very often that the scope is not clear, is vague, and especially if you have to deal with investors or people who invested in your operations, the scope is not clear, the expectations are not clear, and you are born to fail. Yeah, and then that leads nicely to the next step, is the missing involvement of key stakeholders. So make sure if you plan your project that you're not doing it in your, let's say, internal silo, but involve the key stakeholders you need. That can be banks, that can be investors. And first of all, at least in Europe, I would strongly recommend very early as well the local authorities, because they need to give you the permission to run the farm. And then thirdly, I think you need as well to very early involve the suppliers to get them into your planning and your customers into your planning, because in parallel while building your farm, you need to ensure that you're getting the right feed for your insects and things like that. And thirdly, again, very often people are very bullish and aggressive in their planning with short timelines, not planning any buffer for unexpected events. And frankly speaking, I haven't seen any project so far which has not to face some events and things happening which you have not planned and which may result in a delay of your project. So better plan some buffer into your project, and then you will not have the problem. And then thirdly, it's the delivery responsibility. If it's not clear who's doing what in a project, that is not really helping. And as I said, related to another point is the missing risk and issue management, as well for the project, as well for the running operations. And thirdly, I have seen so far that very often we are facing people coming from biology, people coming from other areas, and the business case at the end is still one of the most important parts. If you're not profitable in your insect business, you will have a problem later on, and everybody knows insect proteins are still competing with other protein sources. So keeping the costs in a manageable low level and getting the revenues in, making sure you have the right sales efforts in place to get the customers on board to buy your products, it's really critical. If you are looking for an investor, and that is not for smaller farms, but if you're looking for an investor for larger farms, my experience, and I've been working and helping insect farmers to find investors, there are two main criteria an investor would look like. And I put the most important first, which are the founders and the management team. The founders need to be really right, and there's need to be people who have the right expertise and all the expertise you need, and I mentioned that in the slide, and they need to have shown some kind of, let's say, traction, a proven track record. So just having burned a lot of money without having, let's say, any tangible, measurable, proven results, in a sense of maybe early successful, already a smaller farm, or making some first revenues, all that will help. But at the very end, I can say an investor would accept a business idea which is not totally perfect, let's say 80% or 70%, will still go for an investment if the management team is convincing. So otherwise, it will not work. If the management team is not convincing, you might have the best business idea, nobody will invest. So that's overall, the staff business idea, of course, it's the idea itself. It needs to be something that is to a certain degree scalable and not easy to imitate by others. And you have a certain market size, market share you're aiming for. So, and then as well, I think, which is great if you have already some LOIs or some agreements in place with key suppliers and customers, which makes it more probable that your project will be successful. So, going through the key phases of a project. And you will see the presenters have that shaped differently, but overall you will find the same stuff in the projects, and I will only quickly run through. I think you start off, let's say, I call it shaping, in the sense of getting a high-level idea of the project, validating the project, understanding, which species you will go for, whether it's black soldier fly, cricket, or mealworm, or whatever kind of insect. Understand roughly what you need to invest and to get a rough understanding of the project. That is really something before you take millions in the hand and start a planning session, which is already cost intensive. You may better have a first step, which I would call a shaping phase, which goes on the high level, let's say plan on the high level costs, on the high level location, equipment needs, and things like that. And then in the next step, if you have agreed on that, I think you should have a first idea on the planning phase, which then goes down into much more details. At that stage, you really need to start talking with the local authorities, hopefully based on a planning and some documents you have created in the shaping phase. You do a more detailed designs on technology, processing, air conditioning, building, all kind of that. And then, of course, you need to start as well talking and identify substrate suppliers and buyers for your end products. So you have an understanding, which quantities they can provide. And very often we have seen some projects failing because they were not able to get the substrates. Usually that should be close to you, and that should be substrates that are not underlying a major, let's say, a cost risk, while, today you calculate with a certain cost for substrates, and next year they double the price and your business is no longer profitable. All that we had already in the past facing and causing big problems for insect businesses. And then referring back, you need to define your management team and make sure that you have the right people on board. So normally, if you go for a larger farm, I'm not talking for a smaller farm, that could be a one-man show. But if you go for a more larger farm, you need to have a management team in place. So somebody focusing on the biology and the processes, somebody focusing on finance and planning, and maybe as well somebody focusing on business development and sales. And this is one important thing as well, a hint. Very often we see business cases where the whole sales effort is not planned in, and that can easily go up to 20 to 25% of your overall costs in a sense of market development, sales development, and things like that. Luckily, good message today, and we talked about that in the last webinar. Currently, it looks like there's more demand than supply on insect proteins, so that should be, if you are stringent and follow up, or a no-burner to get the right people and the right customers in place. And then, of course, you need to come up with a project organization, a financing plan, and agreements in place. And then that's actually really the project delivering, in the delivery phase, you actually really deliver the project. You create the building. I think very important as well is an ongoing communication to your key stakeholders, to keep the investors and the public authorities and your business partners, meaning suppliers and buyers, in the loop. So in case there is a move in timelines or milestones, they are aware in an early point of time, or if you're quicker than planned, then of course your suppliers and buyers need to be as well aware that you're delivering earlier. So make sure you keep the communication in place. And then, of course, besides the technical delivery, installing the facility, the machinery, and all that, you need as well to complete your team, meaning not only the management team that is already in place, but you need to recruit some more staff and people who actually help you in running the business. Because even if it's fully automated, you will need still some people who maintain and clean or fix problems. Okay. And at the last step, of course, of the delivery phase is basically the acceptance of the installation, where you jointly with your partners will go through and make sure everything is in place, so you can start and say go. The run organization, it's mainly basically keeping your organization, your production running in a stable manner, to ensure that the quality controls are in place, to avoid disruptions, and to maintain your machinery. Again, we have seen business cases where people have not properly calculated the whole maintenance and quality costs in their business case. So please keep in mind that you need to address that already in the planning and make sure you have the people in the place who do actually the work, or the contracts in place if this is about maintenance. And then, of course, after you've been you're running a stable organization, you may think about increasing and scaling up your business. So again, you jump back to the initial planning phase and will start further planning, while in parallel you make sure your costs and revenues are closely tracked, and that you maybe realize some more opportunities to reduce costs by improving your processes. The main lever actually is really the process itself, and then the technology will follow the process. But if you can eliminate manual steps in your process by automation or by changing the process overall, so the step is not needed, that can have a major impact on a positive impact on your cost base. So that's so far about my part. I will hand over to Vasco, who will talk about his solution. And as I said, please use the chat function. If you have questions, just raise the question in the chat and we'll address that later on. Vasco, your turn. You need to share your screen in a presentation mode, and then we can go ahead.
There we go. We see your screen.
Yes.
Still muted.
Vasco, you're still muted. There's no sound.
Now?
Hello.
Yes.
It's okay, yeah?
Yeah, okay. You can go ahead.
Sorry, technical problems all the time. Okay, so Tecmo Foods, as Bernd said, we are focused on smaller farms and medium-sized farms. So when we started, we followed the idea that a mega factory will be suitable to everyone, but soon we realized that it's very difficult already to approach a new small business, a business where there is no expertise. At least in Portugal, there is no expertise if you try to hire. So it took us maybe 2 years to realize that that's the better approach, which will be a more step-by-step, smaller farms, modular approach. That's when we cook this mission, which is about to develop a network of a centralized operation, which can feed and support smaller farms. The idea is not new, so we are using the poultry model, the aquaculture model, and we know, or at least we believe for the future, some degree of specialization, it will be needed to each part of the process. So looking back, I have good expertise in breeding insects as a hobby, and I started to go deeper on how to scale up operations and study all the methods. We opened our first facility it's a 500 square meter, so I consider medium size in my scale, where we do it all: breeding, growing larvae, processing, separating the frass, etc. So it's full vertical. And then we realized that we would need to take to a lower cost part to decentralize the fattening of the larva. In each case, the tenebro is around, the mealworm is around 7 weeks to 8 weeks, so it's a lot of time. It's not like BSF. And we start to testing small units that I'm going to show you, and put it in a radius of our factory on 100 kilometers. So try to be close for now, because we know that our model was not perfect. It's still not perfect, but this relationship with people is really important. So our process, our idea of process, is to have a hub focus on breeding. So breeding is for us the most difficult part, and I think for all the breeders, to have a really stable egg production of mealworms is not easy. The pupa ratio, so from pupa to beetle, is also difficult to maintain a good percentage. So is really hard. So we need to focus and have specialists here, and then we can ship the small larvae, the neonatas or the eggs, to these farms, and we can teach the people with methods I'm going to show that is really easy to reach a good stable production, compared with the more experienced breeders. And then we collect all the stuff, the live larvae, the frass, etc., and we process on a centralized facility. This is a picture of what we are doing now. Yes, we have logistics. Yes, we have the cost of logistics, but we can take the most by using one voyage with 2 flows. So we send the eggs and feed formula, the start formula that you provide, and then on the same journey back, we collect the larva and sometimes the frass, and ship it back to our facility. So we can easy this logistic impact. And now we are close to each phase. So we need frass on the farmers, so we produce frass on the farmers. So it's a little bit complicated, but I will show you in a very fast way. So we believe that there are 2 approaches for insect production: centralized with some characteristics, and decentralized, which is our hub model. And for me, the most important part, of course, is the risk in terms of investment for us. Since the farmers bought the units from us, it's a way to capitalize the company and to reduce risk, share risk with the farmers. And of course, we are flexible. If tomorrow I have 10 tons of mealworm, I can anticipate, and took us from 4 to 6 months, and expand the capacity to that order, to that specific order. So we are already focused on sales, and we allocate the capacity when we need, not before. And we explain this to the client. It will take 4 to 6 months to get there, and normally it's okay. And then we have a very strong point, which is crowdsourcing. From our experience, we have already 3 farms decentralized, and we are collecting a lot of data, a lot of information from the people. Sometimes they are farmers, sometimes they are not, and even that they have different point of views, and they can help us to grow. So I would say step 1 is to decide what is the correct size for me. How big is my team today? Or if I'm starting to scratch from zero, how big I want to my team? 1, 2, 3, 4. And by that, we have 2 models: mini farms, which are modular units that we can provide, fully operational with all the components, and we have all the data here. It takes little time to take off 1 container. It's 8 hours per week, okay, per cycle. Sorry, per cycle. So a full cycle will take 8 hours. So it's around 1 to 3 weekly labor days. It will depend on the way you are feeding the larva. That's the bigger impact that you are going to have. Then it's very important to see if there is co-products available. So they need to be near. If they are dry, you can be a little bit more further, But if you are using wet products, you need to have they need to be really close, because transport of water is highly costly. And you have another option, which will be transform or create a new warehouse, and this is going to be a bigger operation. So very important is to ask yourself some questions. For me, it's go/no-go questions. So how many human resources I have? What is the seasonality of my farm? For example, if I am a wine producer, I know that I have a peak from September, October, November. And if I want to have the same flow of people on my farm, I can design the operation to take the most advantage of my working hour. Okay. How can I optimize my labor? Then I need to see, who are my suppliers? Can I supply myself? That's a question that I always ask, because it's more easier. Do you have spans from your production, like vegetables, fruits, brand, for example? If not, try to search around you who can give you those materials, and try to fix price with them, because if the price changes too much, it's going to be a problem. Then do I have, of course, electrical energy? If not, can I use solar panels? We also have this. And can I use the live larva? This is controversial, because some countries not possible to feed my animals, for example, flocks of chickens or aquaculture. And can I use the frass in my crops? It also change from country to country. And if the project is not for auto consumption, what can I do? Where can I find my clients? Then the second step is placing. So placing the units is the key. So near the exits, turn to south to minimize the heating, and see if I have the right conditions to create an operation. Good access, not muddy roads. If I have a good access to load the containers and filter operations. So step 3 will be operations prep. So look at my current facilities today, if I have it, and see if I can use the silos, if I can have a room to store the dry products, if I can install a refrigerating chamber to maximize the life of the wet products, etc. And if I want to ship or store live larvae, if I also can fit a controlled temperature chamber, low temperature, to make some stock of the larva. Also very important, prepare a place for the frass, at least to minimum of production, because using fertilizers, at least in our region, is seasonal. So sometimes you sell a lot of frass, sometimes you stop, and then you have to have the capacity to store it. You cannot block your operations. Fourth step will be tech-in. So for us, when you are installing the units, we install all the tech, all the AC units, the controllers, the water system, etc., and at least leave it for 1 to 2 weeks to see if you have internet, if all the components are working perfectly before you introduce the live larva. 5 steps, very important, is to fix the terms with your suppliers. First, the inputs, so all the co-products, see what are the delivery terms, MOQ, the size of the co-products, because we have you cannot imagine the problems that we have managing this. Different sizes, different qualities, different freshness, and this need to be really clear from the beginning. And also, of course, with your output. So who am I selling to, what they want, what are the conditions, etc., etc. 6th step will be how to. So what is my team, what I'm going to do, what are my tasks, my protocols, the procedures, because you need to be, I think the key for the success is to be simple and create simple tasks that can work, create simple protocols and stick to it. If you are always changing the production, always trying to achieve better results all the time, you are not to achieve anything. It's really hard. So we need to have a standard control, and then step by step, really small steps we can focus on increasing. But first, have a really good working routine, have responsible for it. Can be one man solo, and then it's easy to manage. But if it's not, you need to have at least some tools like a Jumbo Walk, stock control, define all the tasks frequency and stick to it. Don't change all the time. It's really hard. Yeah, we have here some tasks that we do in our farms, and we know how to do it, how many times per week, and we cannot be focused on changing everything all the time. 7 is when to, so plan. We need to plan a lot. Our approach is to plan at least one complete cycle in advance. So focusing on what I'm going to do with the next batch, when I'm collecting the poop, when I think the beetles are ready, when I'm going to start breeding, when I'm going to start feeding, wet feeding, etc., etc. So make a 8-week plan, the next cycle. Then we need to have a week plan for the macro activities. And in my experience, it's for now at least, it's really hard to predict how many time you need for each task, because there are always surprises. Even with our almost 4 years experience, we have some surprises. So leave some free space on each day to tackle those surprises, and have a daily plan. Focus on at least the 4 to 5 major tasks that you cannot fail. For example, feeding, taking care of the beetles, etc. So step 8 will be start. Now I'm very clear with all my farmers. Okay, I say you can achieve 1.5 kilos of live larva per box, but let's start lower, and step by step we make a calendar together, and we are going to increase 5% of production each 2 months. That is our target. And I know that we are going to face some problems, because even if you give all the specs, all the tasks, people will start to try to change things. Sometimes it's good, but mostly it's bad. At least on the key things, you cannot change if you don't have knowledge. You could have lucky, but the major times it's going to create a problem. So create a simple table, explain to the farmer, or make yourself, and focus on 5% of increasing every 2 months. It's already really good if you can have at the end of the cycle 1.5 kilograms of mealworm per box. It's really, really good. So start slowly and never experiment on production. If you want to make some experiments with new feeds, with new weights, with new temperatures, have a very small zone apart from production and make 1 box, 3 boxes, 1 column, 4 columns, and then validate. Never experience on the production. We did that before with many problems. 9th step will be steering. So everyone wants to measure everything to achieve the better output, but it's really complicated in insects. And our approach is to install the sensors that we know that are critical: temperature, humidity, also CO2, and now we can focus on samples. So you need to steer the production. How good I am comparing to the growing curve, the standard growing curve. Are my larvae good? No mortality? They are increasing in weight. So make a simple KPIs. So I have some here, like the population ratio, live larva weight, dead larva, etc. Make simple KPIs, stick to it, and try to at least measure per week, per batch. For example, a batch of 500 boxes, 5 boxes per week, 30 larvae per box. It's already a really good sample. So try to see, construct a table with Excel or something, and see the small improvements or detect the problems that you have with these samples. Really, really important. Final step will be management. So focus on simple things. So the production, in my opinion, is really complex, but if you follow a simple strategy, stick to it, improvements will come, no problem. Focus on main drivers, such as cost. 5 production problems. For example, I'm having moth that will impact the production. I'm having big oscillations in terms of the size of the larva at the end of the cycle, or I'm having mortality, or my beetles only last 3 weeks, or my pupa are dying in a 70% ratio. So this will be 5 big problems in production. So try to address it one by one. Focus on the first one. The problematic will be, for example, too much eating on production is always worse than cold, because it will end up on killing all the larvae. And of course, sales. You need to focus on sales from the start of the project. If not, I know that the people that came to us, they say, oh, the demand is really high, there are no production in the market. That can be true, but finding the channels, it's not easy, and it's really complex to work on these areas. For example, it took us like 1.5 years to understand really the live market in Portugal. What is the site, what the customer wants, the size of the larva, the problems in logistics. So it took us almost 2 years, and now we own the market, 80% of the market, and because we know what the client wants. So talk to the client, understand what he needs, what are the pain points. So I'm buying from Spain, for example, and the larva dies, or we have a 30% die off, or the larva are hollow, they don't have meat. So try to understand, feel the pain points. This will be a really good driver for you, because you are starting, and you can focus on delivering a better larva with time. You will understand what can you do to minimize those problems and do it. So thank you, everyone. This was my presentation. I hope I meet the expectations.
Thank you, Vasco.
Vasco, really great presentation. I think it was pretty clear that you have a lot of hands-on experience, and I think you gave a lot of good tips to the people. Just to the audience, I'd just like to remind, use the chat function for if you have questions. Currently, there are no questions, and I personally think there are still a lot of questions should be coming. So if you raise some more questions, it would be really great. I will use the opportunity now to hand over to Jonas. Jonas, you can start sharing, and Vasco, you unshare, please, so we can continue with Jonas' presentation.
Okay, so hello everybody. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So, hello from my side. I'm Jonas. I'm one of the managing director of Made by Made GmbH. So I will start my presentation with a short introduction. I'm not going to give a company presentation. My goal is today more to share our experience about project approach and project planning, because I guess that many of you in the audience thinking of starting a production, and we want to share what is probably important at the beginning. This is my goal, and I'm happy to discuss this maybe in more detail after my talk, or then in the Q&A session. So I'm going to talk about waste to value strategy and using insect technology, project approach, and planning. So as I said, I'm one of the founder. Together with my colleague Kai Hempel, we started our company in 2017. First, we started with a small garage. I'm a manager director, and Kai is the business guy in our team. I'm a biologist, and I work with insects for many, many years. I started with bees and ants, and then moved to grasshopper, cricket, and of course now flies. And for me, the decision was then that I want to use insect and study insects in a different area, in a different task. So I will talk about that a little bit later. So first, short introduction. You can see here part of our production. We are located in East Germany, and first, in 2017, we have a small garage, so lab scale. Then we moved to that facility here, started a pilot plant on 400 square meters. So the transformation, and that is probably the first lesson learned, is that it's very crucial to start from a small scale, I would say maybe lab scale, from a few kilograms to 100 kilograms. And now we're producing on producing several tons per day on 2,500 square meters, where we use the black soldier fly to produce animal feed and protein meal in a closed system, which means that we have our own reproduction and also the processing in that facility. Yeah, as I said, you can see on the right side the map from Europe, located in Germany. We are close to the city Leipzig, which is also maybe an important information that is sometimes beneficial when you are close to a bigger city. Leipzig, around about 500 citizens, helps you to maybe organize your substrate or the input material, because it's a crucial point. Bernd mentioned a lot of important points at the beginning. And when you're close to a city, usually you have access to a lot of organic residues or organic waste due to the feed and food industry. And now I come to the presentation, because it's important for me when you want to start with insect farming, or maybe with that kind of a project, you should address the question, okay, what is my motivation? And also how to start. And first of all, you should answer the question, what is my wants and what are my needs? So I will talk a little bit now from my personal experience, how I come to that project and how we started that project. So first of all, you can imagine, maybe you can think of, I have an old building, I want to reuse it. And the next experience from when potential customer talks to us, they said, okay, I have a lot of organic waste, I want to use it. I think about it, okay, how we can get rid of this organic waste. And other parts are more interested in the proteins and producing alternative proteins. But all these questions, or all these goals, you can answer in different ways, because old buildings, you can think about vertical farming. For organic waste, you can think of biogas or other technology to get rid of it, also depending always on the amount and also maybe on the quality of that material. And in terms of alternative proteins, we can think about of whatever algae and other production facility to produce alternative protein. So for me, it's very crucial that we first think about your motivation. And for my personal approach was, okay, it was quite clear. Insects are very interesting for me, because I worked with insects for many years, and I want to be part of the success, because as a biologist, in terms of biology, insects are very successful in terms of biomass. When we just look at the biomass on a global scale, insects have more than 38-40% of the biomass. And we see that they developed, or many insect species developed, interesting solutions for many niches. And I think we as a society, we can use this, and we should use this. And this is my motivation, where I started this project, and I thought, okay, I want to use that information, I want to use that know-how in a different area. The next interesting part for my personal, my motivation and my needs was, okay, I saw all the global challenges, and you are all familiar with that. So in terms of conventional protein sources, we need more animal proteins in the future, and how we can use that. And when people think about insects, they often think about, okay, for our ecosystem, they have this in mind that it's more for the pollinators. And of course, this is a very important function. On the other hand, insects are very important for decomposing. And I call it the beauty of decomposing, because insects are very efficient to decompose organic waste. And I thought, okay, we should use that also for our task, to use organic waste, to use organic material. And in this short sequence of that video, you see that with this the different development stages of probably, in this case, flies. So you see the larvae, and they are very efficient produce or use the proteins and the fat then for the later development stages. And I think we can use it. And this was my motivation, okay, to transform this experience from the lab, maybe then more to the industry. And when you have your personal motivation clear, then I think it's very, very important that you think about what is my product and what is my target market. At the very early stage, Bernd also mentioned that at the beginning, you should think about, okay, should I produce fresh larvae? Is my product the whole dried larvae? What is my target market for that? I'm more interested in designing insect products for the B2C sectors or for direct customer, or is more I'm more interested in the commodity market and more want to produce the insect protein meal to supply then this product to the feed industry. This is for us what's our goal. It's our approach. I think it's very important that you are clear on that. It's impossible, in my personal opinion, to do everything at the beginning and start all the products and to think, okay, I can produce for the feed industry and also for the food industry. I will develop own products. I will develop own approaches and marketing strategies. I think it's very complex, and in the beginning, when you start such a project, it should be clear what is your product, and is it more about the insect fat? Is it more about fertilizer, which is also a very interesting product itself, or maybe byproducts in, for example, chitin in this case. When you know what is your target market and when you exactly know what is my product, then I think it's it's not easy to answer the question, what is my species I want to work with? When you said, okay, I want to work with the insects, I want to get rid of maybe organic residues, I want to use a old building, I think insects is the technology I want to go with, then you should answer the question, okay, what is my species? Because back to the biology, insects are also very successful in terms of biodiversity, and there are many insect species, and as I said, there are many insect species are found or developed interesting solutions for a specific task or challenges or niches. So we're talking about like soldier fly, the mealworms, maybe grasshoppers, but there are so many species. And depending on the market, you should find the right species for you. And for us, for me, it was quite clear at the beginning due to the legislation to start with the black soldier fly. But in the future, we can also discuss maybe to change species, and you should think about your motivation was what is your goal in general. When this is for you clear, then you should think about the approach. And then is for me the step you should think, okay, how to reach your goals in terms of target market, product, and species. And for us, we were interested in close, or how to say that, more to have a circular economy, to use the potential of insects to use organic residues and to save the nutrition in that organic residues and bring it back to the value chain to the feed industry. So we said we need a decentralized modular insect technology, and a few years ago we developed this, because when you close to a food or feed producer and you have the organic residues, then it should be highly dependent on the location, because organic residues are characterized by a high water content, a low storability. So we were looking for a system which is scalable, easily to adapt to specific organic residues, and also we can easily scale up also to different locations, because in my personal opinion, it is that each insect facility will have has its own feed recipe depending on the substrate you use, and you should be flexible to adapt your system to a specific location. So we use this system here based on shipping containers to scale it up depending on the amount of organic residues and also on the space you have maybe on a specific site. And how we start this then, after you answer all the questions I mentioned, first of all, it's for me very important that you have a personal meeting because you have your target market, your product, you should talk about customers, and when you start then this approach, you talk also then to equipment suppliers. And for me, it's very important to start with a personal meeting because I think we are all here in a quite young industry. It's also about trust, and you should also visit the facilities and check if is something for you in terms of size, in terms of management, etc. Then you should analyze all the customer needs. So from our perspective, to talk about, okay, what is your location? What is your goals? What do you want to reach? And then adapt a business case based on the location. And also adapt then the plant system on the site. It's quite important, I think, due to the different insect species, a different target market, also to find to be technology open and to find the best system for your needs. And after the project definition, you could start then with the visualization, which is very important to define the concept layout. Also, then we developed for our system the feed recipes specific on a special site. Also, then to have the correct mass balance, which is very important in terms of finding the right equipment and also know your costs and the capex. Develop the flow diagrams, etc. Finding the beneficial technology concept, as I said, and then you can start with the precise project plan. And with the precise project plan, this is also when we started with the timing. So when we said, okay, this is a good a timing for the entire project, which is, I think, very important for a successful project, and also define the responsibilities. And after that step, so we start with a communication with the local authorities in terms of legislation, permits, etc. And after that step, when the local authority said, okay, we will support this project, we know exactly what is our substrate. We know what is our mass balance, what equipment we want to use for that project. This is for us then the decision, do we want to invest in that project? And also that's then the point of no return, because then we start with the entire process of the final design, plant technology, infrastructure, the entire project management control concept, getting the approvals and starting working on the manuals on the specific location. And which is from our experience when we built this plant here was to have the right timing, which means long delivery items should be ordered at the very beginning. Procurement coordination of the construction activities, because probably you will should manage several companies in parallel. And we should then also the installation of the infrastructure, electricity, water, with enough buffer, which is also important in my personal opinion. And then we start the installation of the plant technology, and we can start really with the rearing. The first insects maybe moved in that facility, and you can start the implementation, do all the quality checks, also in terms of the products. Is this possible to sell? Do you have a product in the end which can be consoled, and then also get all the contracts you need then. And after this step and for the time framing for the for our plant design, so we process between 20 and 40 tons per day of substrate. You need round about a timing of 8 to 1 year. but it's highly dependent, of course, of the location. If it's necessary, you want to use an old building or you want to build a new building, it's of course always very depending on the location. I hope I was not too fast, but I'm happy to discuss all the further questions in the end. I tried to give some experience and informations. What was our experience here close to Leipzig, and what is very crucial. And yeah, as I said in the beginning, for me, it's very important that the goal should be clear at the beginning. What is my target market? What is my product? And what I really want to process doing the production. Thank you.
Jonas, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Adding a lot of experience and a lot of value to the audience as well. Really much appreciated, and I'd like to add some words as well. I think the message you brought across is you need to basically build your plan and your approach from, let's say, the market-driven way, in a sense of understanding your buyers, understanding which product they want. I think this is one of the key drivers. And secondly, as well, you talked as well about the feed and the substrates. In our prior webinars, we highlighted which are the key costs of actually running an insect farm, and substrates besides energy and depreciations as one of the biggest blocks. So you better think about at what price you have the substrates. And there are ways actually to bring pricing down by, let's say, fermenting maybe substrates which are less expensive to make them usable for insects. And maybe before we had to, have a small funny experience and anecdote. We've been consulting a group of people who wanted to build an insect farm. Initially, they wanted to build a mealworm farm. There were actually a large bakery, industrial baker in Germany, who had tons of bread, and their idea was actually to use that bread waste to feed mealworms. And finally, they already were running, I would always say, a mid-sized farm. Then they decide, because mealworm is more dry food and black soldier fly is more wet food, if you put it in simple words. Then they got the idea, and this is, again, I think you need to be creative. They got the idea actually to use the bread to ferment it to produce alcohol. So they have one product, which is actually, the first product is alcohol. And then, of course, the outcome of the alcohol fermentation is wet. So mealworm was no longer an option. So they had it for black soldier fly. So just to give you an idea, I think the basic message that Jonas brought across, I think there are many aspects to consider and need to balance out. One is the feed source, but on the other hand as well is the location. And to the location, I'd like to add as well, I think the authorities to give you the permission, the experience and showing in the market, it can depend by the city. There are cities that are just going, go ahead, and they're supportive, and there are other cities that may be less positive on insects. So, and then of course, I think the key driver is the customer and how much they can buy and which is actually their need for the product.
Maybe last comment, I think it's also very important that your personal motivation, because many people talk to us and said, okay, I'm interested in insects, but I mean, this is so broad, and you should really think about what is your motivation to start an insect business, and also what is your product, because you get lost very quickly when you just want to do something with insects,
Yeah. There's a lot of enthusiasm in the market, I would put it this way, and I think you need to really nail down your motivation, and I think you need to lay down the financials, because at the very end, you need to be financially successful. If not, it's not working.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, Jonas. I'd like to hand over to Jorf. We are running a bit late, so if everybody's fine, we can overrun the 1.5 hours and have some more time to talk for question and answers. Jorf, your turn.
Thank you very much. And Yes. So I'm going to talk about the 5 pillars of industrial insect farming project development with a focus on black soldier fly. A lot of the things I'm going to say are going to be a confirmation of what the other excellent speakers' message was, but I think from maybe a slightly different viewpoint to help clarify this process of developing an industrial insect farming project. Before we jump to the presentation, a few words about myself. My name is Yoav Shmulevich. I'm originally from Israel, but I lived for many years in South Africa. And in South Africa, I founded Insect Projects, my consultancy company. For many years, I worked in the anaerobic digestion industry, biogas, and in 2017, I was hired to be the head project manager of AgriProtein, the first company in the world to start industrial insect farming. That was my connection to the insect world. And Insect Projects is an engineering consultancy company. And what we do, we offer engineering services that is classic engineering, only tailored for black soldier fly. So doing a layout, doing a process flow diagram, mass and energy balance, equipment list, operating procedures, etc. Support with project development, so that's helping identify the best feedstock, identify a location, identify your products, help with business planning, regulatory applications, etc. And project management, that is basically controlling the time, the budget, and the deliverables of a project. And in the last 6 years, I've worked with over 40 companies, including some of the major players in the industry, in over 20 countries, almost in all continents. Insect Project is a one-man show, but I'm not alone. I have a wide network of technology providers, research institutes, academic researchers, etc. So before we go to the 5 pillars, just to make sure we're on the same page, what is a project? A project has the 3 characters of clear deliverables, clear budget, and a clear schedule, start and end date. And for example, your project can be to develop a project. In this case, your deliverables is to reach a financial close, to secure the money for the project. That's project development. That's what I'm going to focus on in this presentation. The more classic example is that your project is to build an insect farm, to build a project. Then your target will be to reach a certain throughput and produce certain quality and quantity of products, for example. What is an industrial insect farm? Well, quite clear. The function is to process feed or waste, but waste is actually a resource, but let's say waste, into animal products. In our case, the animal is an insect or a black soldier fly. The characters of an industrial insect farm, roughly speaking, is that it's a continuous operation. So it's not just operating here and there, it's continuous. It has some automated features. It's commercial, so the purpose is to produce product and sell them for a profit, and a certain scale, that it needs to be a medium to a large scale. And this is not cast in stone, but we're more or less talking about something above 10 to 50 tons per day. More above 50 tons per day, you start to be commercial. Currently, we have about 5 projects, large-scale industrial insect farm projects in operation. We have about 5 under constructions, and there's many non-industrial insect farms around the world that are maybe small or just not continuous or just not commercial, but that is the situation. So what are the 5 pillars of industrial insect project farming development? So the 5 pillars are location, feedstock, process, and technology. And the process is how the process flows, and the technology is the equipment and the machinery that enables this process. We have the products and the commercial aspect. So these are the 5 pillars. If I had to choose one pillar out of these 5, even though I think they're all equivalent, but if I have to choose one, I would say the feedstock is the most important one, and we'll explain later. And the project developer work is really to balance these 5 pillars when he developed the project, always working on all of them when they balance with each other. And in order to explain the 5 pillars, the best way to explain each pillar is by explaining its connection with the others. So that's what I will do in the following slides. So let's start with the location. Pretty clear is where you are or where the project is. Interesting to note that most insect farms location is actually where the project developer, the person, is living. Usually they like to build their project in their neighborhood, in their city, or at the very least at their country. And to start explain the location pillar, we will talk about its connection with the others. So what is the connection between your location and your feedstock? So typically we find that the feedstock of an insect farm has 70% moisture. So that is a lot of water, and that kind of outlines the radius that you can look for your feedstock. So considering that we have a lot of water and the unit economics of an insect farm, we find that typically at a radius of around 50 to 100 kilometer radius, it makes sense to fetch feedstock. And further than that, it just becomes too expensive. What is the connection between your location and your technology? Well, very strong connection here. So your location has certain ambient weather, ambient conditions, and we know that the HVAC is, in most insect farms, is the largest capital and operational expenditure of the project, the first or the second biggest. So very strong connection between your ambient conditions, your weather conditions, and your technology. Obviously, your land cost, if your land is very expensive, then you will try to build high and small. If your land is cheap, you can spread more widely. And your local EPC, very strong connection between your location and your technology is your EPC. EPC stands for engineering, procurement, and construction. So you can get help from international companies, but eventually someone will have to do the engineering for your specific location, someone who knows the local standards and regulation. The procurement, someone locally will have to receive all the equipment that you get. And construction, of course, someone on the ground will have to put everything together, install it, commission it. The other connection between your location and technology is that your utility costs are very location specific, and they will, to a large effect, determine your technology choice. So, for example, are you going to use gas heater or electric heater? The next connections to establish is between your location and your products. Well, here the connection between your main products, which are usually protein and oil, here the connection is not that strong because these products are very dense. They have very high value density, so it's quite easy to ship them around. However, your frass, that is a different story. Your frass has a low density. It has typically low value, so low money density per ton or per cubic meter of frass, and also have quite high moisture content, anything between 40 to 60 moisture content. So that's still a lot of water. So again, we find with the frass that we're quite limited to a 50 to 100 kilometer radius. We have to find someone to take it within this radius. And lastly, between your location commercial aspects, well, of course, you will need to have a land lease or land purchase agreement. You will have to, typically we also find that financing the project is also something that is quite local. If it's a bank that you're going to get a loan, typically the bank wants to give the loan in the country. If you have private equity, it's a bit more flexible, but still people like to invest where they can visit. Grants is a very local thing and can have very big effect on your project. If you can get a grant, of course, it's better. And any tax implications. And lastly, regulation, which I put here under commercial, also have a very strong effect on the agreements and anything else in your project. The next pillar is the feedstock pillar. And I really like to use the quote, garbage in, garbage out. For me, I said before, the feedstock is the most important. If you have good feedstock, widely speaking, you can say you will have a good project. If you have shit feedstock, the whole thing is not going to work. And why I say it's the most important is because this is where the process begins. So any change you make in the feedstock will have a full downstream effect on your entire project and all the other legs. So for me, it's really, really the important pillar to start with. To explain better feedstock, let's talk about what is the connection between feedstock and technology. Well, very, very strong connection here. Your feedstock will affect your kitchen or your feedstock preparation plant, obviously. It will affect the medium that you're going to use to grow, if it's crate, if it's shelves, if it's racks, very related to your feedstock. Your HVAC system, HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, air conditioning. Very strong connection here because we need to treat the different feedstock, have different emissions, different heat generations. So the HVAC system is really designed for specific feedstocks. And of course, your harvesting system, how you're going to separate your insect from your frass is very related to the feedstock. If you have large particles, small particles will change the technology you're going to use to separate. The connection between feedstock and products. I like to use the quote here, what we eat is what we are. Obviously, your feedstock will have a very big effect on the quality and the quantity of your products. Good feedstock will produce good quality and good quantity. And very strong connection between the regulations. The regulation, and certainly in Western countries, in Europe, in North America, very strong regulations that determine what feedstock you can use to make what products. And lastly, to connect the feedstock with the commercial pillar, well, you will definitely need a supply agreement to get your project financed and get it going, a feedstock supply agreement. And very strong connection to your bottom line is your feedstock a waste? Maybe you get a gate fee to take it and it's an income. Maybe your feedstock is more of a byproduct from a feed industry and then you need to pay to take it. So very strong effect here. Let's talk about technology. So to explain technology, we just need to tie it now to products and the commercial pillars. So technology and products. Well, the main effect here is on your processing technology. Are we going to produce dry larvae or are we going to render the larva to make meal and oil? And if we choose to render, are we going to use wet or dry rendering? Very strong connection between your products. Why? Because in the end, your end customers, if it's the pets, the chickens, the fish, they will determine what products you're going to make and how you're going to make them. So the standards, certifications, also requirement by your clients will determine what technology you're going to use to produce these products for these clients. Then tying the technology pillar with the commercial pillar, well, very strong agreement in your project is your EPC contract. We said before, it's an engineering, procurement, construction contract. This contract has a very big effect on your bottom line, the cost and the performance of this contract. The breeding, are you going to do the breeding yourself or are you going to try to get the breeding from third parties? This is something that is developing more and more. And labor costs have a very strong effect on your technology. So are you going to use high labor or high automation? And technology and commercial, you can build your project as a Mercedes or as a Toyota. Both are good cars. Both will take you from point A to B, just in a very different way and feeling. So very important connection here between your technology and commercial. Last pillar to explain is the products and the commercial aspect. So what is the commercial? The commercial is how you finance the project. It's all the contracts related to your project, your supply agreement, your offtake agreement, your lead agreement, your engineering, procurement, construction agreements. So what is the connection between products and commercials? Well, very obvious effect. Your product offtake agreement is a very, very important contract in your project and will determine the bottom line profitability. The product is where it all ends. So if the feedstock is where it all starts and have a full effect downstream, the product have a full effect upstream. So any change in your product might affect the process, the process design, the feedstock that you choose, and anything in the project. And then lastly is that what we find in most projects, almost all around the world, if you look at the business plan, the cash flow model, the projects are most sensitive to the product price. Very, very strong connection here between your products and the commercial aspects of your project. Then to finish off, how do we balance all these pillars together? So my recommended methodology is to put anchors in your project development, and I will explain. You try to anchor as many pillars as you can, so you can work out the other pillars. Why? Because we have these 5 pillars, 5 unknowns in the project, and so we have this equation to solve with 5 unknowns. This is mathematically, it's very, very hard to solve such an equation. So we try to anchor some of these unknowns and then work out the others. So I'll just give a few examples. For example, Mr. X, he wants to build a project in his neighborhood, so he can anchor the location pillar. Now that he anchored the location pillar, he knows that he can look for feedstock in a 50 to 100 kilometer radius, so now he can anchor the feedstock pillar. Then he can work out the other pillars, so the technology needs to suit the location and the feedstock that he found, and the product and the commercial will follow. Another example is company Y that was very lucky to secure a good offtake agreement. So they can anchor the product pillar. And now once they anchor that pillar, they can, they know they're quite flexible with their location because they can ship their product around. But they can now go and work out their feedstock because the product needs to suit the feedstock, and they can work out the other pillars. And then the last example is developer Z that has a certain budget. He knows he has a certain budget, and he has a certain returns on investment. So he can anchor the commercial pillar. Now, once he anchored the commercial pillar, he can look for a location, and he's quite flexible, but he has a budget, so he knows he's looking for an expensive place or a cheap place. He has a good idea of how much feedstock he's going to use because he has a budget. He knows more or less what is the size, so he can anchor the feedstock, and then he can work out the other pillars. And that is for my presentation. Thank you very much, and I will be available to answer your questions later. That is me, Yoav Shmulevich from Insect Projects.
Yoav, many, many thanks.
Great, thank you.
Giving another angle on how to approach. So I think we have learned a lot. And I personally am looking forward as well to continue with all the presenters because it's pretty interesting. Still a reminder, not too much questions or basically no questions. So it seems that we need to encourage you. Don't be shy. Don't worry if you think your question is too basic. Nevertheless, please ask the questions. I will hand over now to Arthur for the last presentation on our product offerings from ento-connect besides our website we've been talking already on the past.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bernd. So I will share my screen with you guys. So it's loading. Let me know when you can see it.
I can see the front slide.
Okay, great. So first milestone achieved. Perfect. So basically, the idea of this, so to say, last presentation is to give you some guidance in order how to proceed with the very fruitful information that we just received earlier from our fellow presenters. So we covered a lot of topics, a lot of so to say tasks that need to be completed, a lot of decisions that have to be made, and I personally really like the idea of anchors because that's always a big headache if you don't have any constraints or if there is, let's say, too much degree of freedom. So therefore, it is important to start somewhere, and that's basically also the idea of ento-connect and why we founded it and what we are basically doing inside of this this venture. Since we have a background in that industry, we know many of these aspects, we know many of the players, and so our motivation and objective of all this is, let's say, bring it together at the end of the day to get to a point where the industry can grow, can thrive. So we have also mentioned the amount of facilities that are up and running in operation. In comparison to the time frame that we are speaking of, the numbers should be higher, and so we see it as our task to contribute to that by connecting the players, and also, let's say, providing some assistance at some level to get things up and running. So basically, most of the key questions have already been addressed. To start very high level, you should check what are the constraints. And I also like the idea of Jonas, to speak about the motivation, because insects, it's a nice thing. So I think we all agree on that. Otherwise, we would not be in this webinar. But to speak about the personal motivation, is it a commercial motivation? Is it an environmental motivation? That might help in order to answer some of the questions. For example, if it's to close some gaps in the food chain, maybe you would go either in terms of mealworm than black soldier fly, because you can somehow bypass farmed animals in this case. So the list is relatively long of questions to answers, and for someone that is, let's say, new to the industry, some answers might be obvious, others might be not obvious. And since we had that conversations multiple times before, I think in a very, very early stage, and now I'm addressing really the people that are, let's say, not yet there or thinking of starting their business. So we can definitely assist here. So we briefly went through the planning phases, so no need for me to repeat that. So obviously, before starting something, a lot of planning is needed, depending on what kind of scale you're aiming for. So therefore, I would really like to stress the point of planning. Also from my background as an engineer, before you build a house, you consult your architect first, and therefore he will do all that stuff for you. And the same applies for insect projects or other industries or projects that have, let's say, this certain scale or that certain complexity at least. So basically, how can you practically start? So first would be obvious to register on our website. That's a quick one, so I can highly recommend that. I think most of the people that we have here are already registered. So then participate in the webinar. So you're on a good way. Yeah, since you are here, congratulations, you made the second milestone. And then what comes next? Well, that strongly depends. So we have been, let's say, speaking to many people, many companies, partners in the industry, in order to, let's say, define, so to say, products, services, whatever. And we try to work on, let's say, several modules that could apply to you. So first one would be a starter workshop, means for interested people, organizations that have not been in touch yet with the insects, to cover the main aspects. The other thing would be, let's say, design and planning. So then obviously we go a little bit deeper, check what's already there, where are the gaps, following, let's say, good engineering practice, but also sharing our experience from the market, but also involving the people that we have here in the webinar, or our network, basically. So it's not a one or two man show in this case. The idea of, as I mentioned, of ento-connect is really to profit from the network. Then on the other end, there could be a kind of, let's say, pre-engineering. Pre-engineering means shaping the business case, making some first initial sketches, how it can look like, and also to get to some first commercial numbers to check whether it makes sense in this specific case. And lastly, if you already have something and you would like to have someone that will have a closer look on what you're doing, getting some more feedback, a review of these documents like business plan, etc. It's also possible. So it's the same thing like you do with with the lawyers or tax people. So before doing some decisions that might cost a few euros, it's much easier to have someone from the outside having a brief look on what you're doing. And on the other hand, we fully understand that every approach, every project, in this case, it's completely unique. So therefore, we are also trying not to stress this let's say packages too much, but really offer something that is customized for the individual projects. And very quickly, that was my part. Since we are running out of time, I hope I was able to catch up a little bit, so we have some more time for the Q&As.
So thank you, Arthur. Maybe just some additional comment. As Arthur already said, we are not on the way to say that we know everything. So our approach is that we know a lot, but we know especially the right experts, and some of them are in this presentation today in the webinar. So we see us as our core focus to pull the right strings and get you on the right way, if you put it this way. And then there are some key offerings, we go ahead. Timing-wise, it doesn't look like we have really some core questions. The questions were more technical on registration of the webinar and things like that, which I already have answered in the chat functions. So Arthur, could you maybe check the Q&A if there maybe somebody has some questions? If not, I think we can wrap up. We are already running towards the end.
We have one question.
Yeah.
Maybe before jumping into this question, I have a question, since as I mentioned with my technical background, I'm also very eager to hear from my fellow colleagues about, let's say, their experience. So since the topic of the webinar was project management, and we all know that there are different type of projects. So that question, basically goes out to all our presenters. So how do you see, let's say, most of the projects that you have been working on? Was it more a waterfall approach, or was it more agile, or let's say a hybrid approach of having something in between?
May I start? So I would say it was a hybrid. So maybe the idea was to have a waterfall, but in the end, I think the complexity of insect technology is, I think you have mentioned that, and the thing about the substrate and to be really sure what is your product, the quality, and is it possible to get the substrate on the site, also in the amount for that price, because probably you start with a small pilot plan and you have a substrate and it's working fine, you have a nice feed recipe, and then you said, okay, you want to scale up, then you have to talk to the producers and to say, okay, I need a contract for 10 years or whatever. It's complicated probably, and you have to change then the feed recipe, and then you have to adapt probably your technology based due to the changes in your substrate. So so I think it's a hybrid.
Okay. So how about your experience, since you have worked on both sides?
Yes, I must say, admit I'm not 100% clear on what's the difference between the waterfall approach and the agile approach, but I think the hybrid is really what most project developers follow, because yes, it's very nice to have these 5 pillars and to have the methodology that trying to anchor one, but in real life, you place an anchor and then it moves. So it's good to try placing anchors, but you need to consider that they're moving. So yes, it's really a hybrid, and every project is very different. In some projects, the feedstock is very difficult, so there's a lot of changes there. In other projects, the financing is very difficult, so a lot of changes there. So in the end, every project is really unique and need a very, very unique approach, I find.
Okay,
Maybe comment from my side. I personally think there are elements in the project which can be done agile, but there are as well elements that need to be done waterfall. You know, Arthur, you are an engineer, so installing the machinery and all that type of stuff, I personally don't doubt that that is an agile way to do it. I think you need to have a
Not
clear
an
plan in
effective one.
place. Yeah, not
Yeah.
an effective one. So this is one thing. I personally have one question as well to the presenters, and taking a look to people I talked and taking a look at the presenters today. It seems to me nobody starts, you know, I'm doing the big one, industrial farm right away. It seems to me that it's really beneficial that you start on a smaller scale to gain some experience before you do the big step. Maybe people can comment. I think Vasco definitely has his point of view as he is pushing for that approach. But as well, Jonas and Joaf, would be great if you can comment on that. Maybe as well, one of the drivers is, you know, coming from an investor's standpoint, asking for, I don't know, X millions without having any prior experience in running at least a smaller farm. So I see two ways. People on the one hand trying to find the investors to go really right away to an industrial farm. And other people, like most of, let's say, people in our network, going for, let's say, a smaller mid-sized farm to gain experience and then scale up. Yeah, feel free to answer on that.
Maybe I can start. So maybe best to first explain what is wrong with the modular approach and starting small and growing organically. What is wrong with that? I mean, that's all. What is wrong with that is that it takes a lot of time, and time is money. And the other fundamental thing that is difficult with that is that to run a small scale, usually a small scale farm is harder to make profitable than a large scale farm because of the economy of scale. The economy of scale is very strong in an insect farm. So yes, it's great to take the time and build something small and grow, but it costs a lot of money. So that's a disadvantage. Why would you do a small scale and grow organically? Well, there may be three reasons. One is that you don't have the experience and you want to learn, and you need to pay the school fees. The other reason is that your investors maybe don't believe that you can farm insects, and they want to see that you prove that you can farm insects. And then the third reason is for your product offtake, because if you want to secure a product offtake, sometimes your off-takers, they demand that you send them samples, and sometimes they demand a serious size sample, and they want to see that the sample come from exactly the feedstock you're going to use. So sometimes it's to generate samples. So that would be the reason to do to grow organically, and the reasons why not to grow organically from my perspective.
Maybe one addition on that. I think especially if you talk about the buyers. I think the goal must be that you have buyers who can take constantly, you know, selling each small sample to another buyer is a lot of sales costs. So on the other hand, let's say industrial buyers will require that you are able to deliver, let's say, constant large quantities and quantities. So, okay, any more comments from Jonas or Vasco?
I agree. And I would say I would always go first with a small approach, a smaller scale, and then scale up the facilities is due to the risk management, because of course there's economy of scale. On the other hand, there's very young technology and young industry, and there are not so many giant factories around the globe. There is not really the proof that there's really the economy of scale due to the substrate you have to bring to that site, all the yeah, with all the challenges all the insect producer have. There's no secret about it that, I mean, we face all the same challenges. And probably for me, it's the same challenges for the smaller production than to a bigger one. And for the bigger one, there's a big problem. And for the smaller one, is maybe a smaller problem. It's probably easier to solve it in a smaller facility and then scale up when you are really sure that your facility is working or your technology is the right technology for your approach. Before you invest a lot of money and have a giant factory, and in the end you faces giant challenges. So I would go due to the risk management in smaller steps. Of course, it maybe takes more time, and time is money. That's true. But on the other hand, it's maybe it's more likely to reach your goals with smaller steps compared to a big step, and then probably you will fall.
Yeah, I agree. So basically with insects, there's no, let's say, testing period like you have it with software, for example. But I think there is no need that much for proof of concept because there are multiple pilot farms out there. I actually stopped counting a lot of pilot farms. So we know how it works. We know how the recipes more or less work. And then it is on one end, so as you have said, it's about, supplying samples, but also getting a personal feeling on what you're doing. Also checking your motivation. Is that the right thing to do before investing multiple millions into in a mid-scale or industrial scale facility? You really have to be sure that this is what you would like to do. And unfortunately, the market is not that large that you can just, let's say, simply go to a plant, spend a few weeks there, check if this is what you would like to do, and then run your own business. So we are still in an early stage where you need to get the experience somehow by yourself. So therefore, starting small and then scaling up, it's good. Growing it organically, like you would do with a regular business, it's tough because at some point there is a scale or there's some benefit of being bigger in terms of economical aspects. So therefore, you need to prove yourself also to the investors, to your stakeholders that this is the right way.
Yeah, and as I said, I think there is no final answer, frankly. If I take the large investments, if I take Europe, like insect and things like that, which have a triple million kind of investment, for me, still not transparent how profitable they actually are, or they're just growing by growing down facilities, growing by buying other companies and pushing the products in the market. Maybe not to a profitable price, just to gain market share. That's the game which is going on. So it's, I would say, the Amazon, Google kind of play. I see one risk is that those companies have enough money in their pocket to secure IP, which can block other companies using, let's say, same processes or same technology because they claim they have a patent on that and things like that. We had that already in the discussion, Arthur, you remember, with one of our presenters who said they're facing some challenges in this idea because they cannot even do marketing or sales activities presenting their technology because it's not actually technology stolen, whatever, it's their own technology, but there are patents already out in the place by large players like Insect who are now focusing, and I'm just telling, the funny example of Apple suing now Swiss apple farmers using Apple as a logo, so there might be some risks coming up in this development. Okay, if there are no further questions.
We have a question, Bernd. So that was raised from by Fabio. That one is addressed to Yoav. So Yoav, you mentioned that the feedstock is one of the important pillars. And so the question is, what is roughly the percentage on the OPEX? If you just take one or two example cases. So how do you see the profitability in the business based on the European legislation and also the risk aspect of manure and post-consumer waste as a feed source? These are actually 3 questions, but I think you can answer it. And
Okay, so let's start with the percent. Very hard to give accurate percent to the portion of feedstock in the capex and opex. But roughly speaking, typically what we find in insect projects is that energy and HVAC is the largest capex opex component. Labor is either the first or the second in terms of capex and opex, because if you don't have labor, then you have automation. And then third, more or less, is the feedstock. But with a caveat that in some projects, the focus is on waste management and not protein and oil production. In such cases, the feedstock is not a burden. The feedstock is the main income stream. So important to understand that. What was the second part of the question?
So the second part was how you see, the profitability in the European, legal framework in terms of the feedstock.
So yeah, and the European framework is very limiting. It's very good. It's the most developed regulation and legislation. So it's good in the sense that it draws a path and direction for everybody to follow. But it's quite strict. But it's also developing and getting more advanced, more smart, and a bit less strict on certain aspects. But in Europe, what we find is that most companies, they focus on buying high quality byproducts, typically byproducts from corn, wheat processing. There's a lot of byproducts from there. They're competing with other animals to buy these byproducts to make very high quality products, but they sell their products for very good price, so they can afford to pay good price for their feedstock. In other countries, it's a bit different. In Asia, in South America, we see different mechanisms. And obviously, again, some projects focus on waste management, and then the feedstock is a completely different thing. They don't care so much about regulation, at least not regulation that relates to feed and food production. That's becoming completely irrelevant. And the third part of the question?
The third part was actually a good link to what you said. It's about the safety aspect of these substrate like manure, post-consumer waste, etc. How do you see that affecting the end product, or also let's say the target market for the product?
So yes, if you targeting waste, in terms of safety, there's a bit more safety risk, but it's not really big safety risk. I mean, there's been industries that's been going for thousands of years that deal with waste management. So all the waste mitigation practices are already there, and it's not that risky that your manure will explode or something like that. But you do need to consider these risks. And then again, if you're using waste, you're most probably not going to make feed or food products for sure. But in some countries and in some specific projects, maybe you can find a sweet spot between waste management and producing feedstock. You won't be able to do it in Europe. You won't be able to do it in North America. But in some countries, this is maybe a great opportunity.
And so maybe I can add something to that question, so a question from my side. So if you have the larvae that have been reared on manure, for example, or on the post-consumer waste, like you did in South Africa. So as far as I understood, these products, they were not meant, obviously not for food, and also not for feed, but just in case. So what happens? So do we see any analysis that are showing some risk for the consumers?
Regarding risk for the consumers, I'm not aware of too much research that was done on that. So definitely need to be careful with that. I think that's why in Europe they are so careful, because there is no research, there is no experience. So they're very careful with what you can feed your insect and then give their insect as feed and food. We've seen some countries, in third world countries, where there's less legislation, that companies are using waste like manure and then using the insect as not as food, but as feed, maybe for chickens, for fish. And also consider that we have the meat industry, and from the meat industry come a lot of byproducts, and these byproducts also go through certain processing, and they're being sold to Asia as feed, not complying with European regulation, but still making a good business, and still didn't start a new mad cow disease. So yes, you need to be very careful, you need to be responsible, but you also need to be business orientated. And if you find an opportunity to get a gate fee for waste and sell feed as a product, maybe you have a winning project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, we can wrap up the webinar. So first of all, great thank you to all the speakers, and another great thank you to the audience who has been listening and registered to the webinar. And as I've seen that some have joined during the webinar, so they haven't heard what I said at the beginning, I'd like to repeat that we are registering this webinar and recording this webinar, and the webinar itself plus the presentations will be made available on our website, just giving us some time to polish up, to cut and make it nice. So it may take 1 week or so until it's all available on our website. I'd like as well to mention that we have another webinar going on early August. This is the last webinar of this series, so it will be more or less an expert panel. So please do not expect presentations. But on the other hand, this is the place where we can spend 1.5 hours to get some of the experts who have presented in the prior webinars and in this webinar to answer further questions. So if you have those questions, please let us know either by just sending us a mail. You have seen that on the presentation, so the contact information, or send us a mail on our website. That works as well. One more thing in a sense of our future, we currently like to connect information which are actually future topics you want to talk about and want us to talk about and move forward, which is your focus and things like that. Again, here it would be great if you share some ideas, some suggestions. We are very open and appreciate very much your input. Please keep in mind, ento-connect is not a one-way street. We offer our website for free. We do the webinars for free. So it would be great if the community as well helps us to further develop and not us, but helps the insect industry by providing your ideas, your suggestions, so we can move forward and provide more value-added content to the community. So that's it. Thanks to everybody. Maybe a small comment to our speakers. We will all log off, and if our speakers can log on to the same link, so we can just do a little debrief of the webinar, it would be really great. Thank you very much to everybody, and have a nice weekend and big success in your future or current insect activities. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.